Hello, hi everyone. I'm just gonna wait for everybody to join. So let's put in the chat. Hi, everyone. Hi, hello. Hi, Corey Trevor. So this is the chat where we can all talk. Welcome back for those of you that came last week. And welcome to everybody that's new. So it looks like we got some people that have joined. So hi everyone, how are you doing? Let me know how you're doing in the chat. Before we get started, I'll just wait a few minutes for people to join on. Okay. So welcome. If you're new here, last week we talked a little bit about burnout, and we talked a little bit about taking a digital detox. So I want everybody that was here last week, if you can comment and let me know how that went. So if you weren't here last week, what we recommended was taking 1 hour a day to unplug from your digital devices. So let's see how that was. For me, I found it quite challenging. I found it difficult to, unplug every day for about an hour. But let's see what everybody thought and how it went. Was it hard? Was it easy? Or was it difficult? And then once we just recap that, we're going to start with talking all about bloating. This week we'll be chatting about the root causes of bloating and a little bit about how you can overcome that. Okay, so anybody, does sleeping count? So no, we talked about trying to do it mindfully away from sleeping. I did spend some time exercising in the morning, so that's great. So that was a great thing you could do instead of, using your electronic devices. I stopped checking my phone in the morning this week. It was so hard at first, but I felt so much better. Yes, that was something that I tried to do too, like avoiding the phone when I first wake up and then trying to limit it before I go to bed. I loved it. I stopped watching all the bad news and wait outside and planted stuff. Great. Yeah, so news is a huge thing that can, impact our health. Like, it's great for getting information, but sometimes if it's too overwhelming, especially now with everything going on, that's great that you're able to unplug from that. So I'm so glad that some of you were able to do that. It was hard to do. Somebody else is saying, I have to try harder. Yeah, so it's not something that's going to be, overnight that we can change it. If you keep working at it, sometimes it takes a while to get into the habit of doing something. Even with myself, it's something that I want to try to consciously make a reminder to do. So that's great. I'm so glad that all of you were able to try to do that. Okay, so for those of you that are new here, we're going to be going into depth about different health topics. And then throughout the chat, I will be, listening to your comments and trying to give some feedback and give you some health tips. And then we'll do like a Q&A also at the end. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, somebody else is mentioning it's really hard not to use our phones. Like, we use them for everything. Need to move to Arkansas or Yellowstone. Yeah, so we do use our phones for everything. So, okay, great. So this week we're talking all about bloating. So how many of you experience bloating? Please let me know in the comments. Do you experience it every day? Is it, here and there? I know sometimes I experience it too. So we're going to talk a little bit about what bloating is. So bloating can be due to many different things. It can be due to water retention. So that could be due to having too much salt, having too many carbohydrates, or like due to changes in hormones. It can be due to excess air in the stomach. So we're going to talk about that. And it can also be due to excess gas in the stomach. So we're also going to talk about causes of that. Great. So some people are saying, well, I feel fat all the time. I hate it. How do you get rid of it? Well, we'll give you some tips. And then here and there, I feel like it's the most common complaint I hear from friends and family. I agree. I think a lot of people, feel bloated, whether it be, here and there or every day. And yeah, so let's dive into some of the causes. Okay. So kind of like what I mentioned, bloating can be due to different things like excess air, excess gas, or water retention. And then there's some like root causes that can cause it too. So for example, first one would be like food sensitivities or food intolerances. So an intolerance is when you actually cannot digest something. So that would be you have a lactose intolerance and you can't digest lactose because you don't have the enzyme lactase. Or you have a gluten intolerance and you can't digest that. That's different from celiac disease. Celiac disease is actually an autoimmune condition, but a gluten intolerance would be like you can't digest gluten. Then sensitivities are things that can cause delayed reactions. So they're an immune response. They're usually due to, if we're getting technical, they're due to IgG or IgM immune response. And they can be delayed. So you might eat something and then about 3 days later, you actually might feel the symptoms. So that's kind of the difference between an intolerance or a sensitivity. So we have some questions about, can stress cause bloating? Yes, definitely. So we'll jump into that. Okay. So food intolerance would be, like I mentioned, lactose or gluten, and that you would have symptoms of like gas, bloating, can be diarrhea or constipation. And then a food sensitivity would be things like maybe you're sensitive to the nightshade family of vegetables. So things like that's like peppers and eggplants and potatoes, or maybe you're just, sensitive to meat or dairy. So those kind of things would show up later, maybe not right away. And then you can also have symptoms like headaches, brain fog, some skin rashes. So that would be the difference between a intolerance and a sensitivity. So I hope that was kind of clear about what the difference between that is. So that's one thing. The next one would be low stomach acid. So we need stomach acid to digest everything. We need to digest our food. So the way digestion starts is it actually starts in our mouth with our saliva, and we have salivary enzymes that break things down. Then when the food travels down into the stomach, that's where we have our stomach acid, and it does a lot of the digestion, especially for things like proteins and meats. And then the food will move along into the intestines, and you have more enzymes that break things down. So a common thing that people have is actually low stomach acid, and you're not able to digest your food, and therefore you would experience bloating. So symptoms of that would be like you can experience cramping, actually acid reflux. So a lot of the times we think that if you have too much acid, you'll have acid reflux, but it can actually be too low stomach acid as well. So that would be a symptom. And then of course, either, indigestion, you're not able to digest things properly. Maybe you see undigested food in your stools. So those are, those are symptoms of low stomach acid. And I'll go into tips about all of those later on. So we got sensitivities, intolerances, low stomach acid. Let's talk a little bit about stress, which is what somebody had mentioned. So how can stress cause bloating? I'm not sure if any of you know, but we have our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous systems. So your parasympathetic is your rest, digest nervous system. So that is what is important for digesting your food. And then your sympathetic nervous system is that like fight or flight. And I think I kind of talked about this last week to you. It's like that fight or flight is really meant for instant stressors where we need to increase our, cortisol levels and fight off something, but it shouldn't be long term. So if you are under constant stress, then you're constantly in that sympathetic nervous system state, and you're not in the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's what we need to activate in order to properly rest and digest. So I want to jump into the chat. Does anybody here ever feel stressed and experience bloating due to stress? Or did you maybe not know that that could be a cause? And is that something that you're now thinking about, you know what, like when I have a stressful situation at work, or when I went through a stressful period in my life, or maybe I wrote exams like myself, did you ever feel bloated? And let me know. So, Sophia mentioned, like, yes, for me, it's stress. I agree too. And, along with other symptoms, you would feel bloated, but then you might experience just other symptoms of stress. Maybe you experience anxiety or brain fog or fatigue. So that's definitely a huge factor that maybe not all of us realize. So we also have a note here like everyone should cancel wheat. It helped my IBS so much. Yeah, so IBS is a whole nother thing that we can talk about another time, because even with IBS, there are, root causes of that as well. And then like wheat, it can be a trigger. Like I mentioned, it can be a food sensitivity or an intolerance. And then it might just be because maybe it's heavily processed or we're not able to fully digest it. So we also have a note about that, I used to be stressed and was bloated, but saw a chiropractor that healed them. Well, that's great. Yeah. So like it's important to, heal your stress so it can prevent symptoms, like we said, bloating. Okay. So drinking more water and keeping walking. Yep, that helps with stress. So what is IBS? We'll get into IBS maybe another time, but it's basically irritable bowel syndrome, and it doesn't necessarily have a specific cause. Like when you're diagnosed with it, you kind of have to figure out what is the root cause of that. And it's just, that feeling of incomplete bowel movements, or you're alternating between diarrhea or constipation, you have bloating, you have abdominal pain. So yeah, we'll chat about that probably another time, or we can chat about it at the end of today because it's a huge topic. Okay, so we talked about the sensitivities, intolerances. We talked about low stomach acid and stress, all of those being causes of bloating. Now let's jump into excess air in your gut. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it can be due to too much air. So things that can cause too much air in your gut is like if you're chewing too fast. So as you chew, you're like inhaling air as you chew. So that can be like due to fast eating, or you're not taking enough time to chew your food. And these are very common things that we do. We get hungry, we're stressed in a world where everything's on the go. So we eat really fast, or maybe we're distracted while we're eating, so we're eating at our desk while we're on our computer. Those are big things. Drinking like carbonated drinks can cause excess air in the gut, and also drinking through a straw can cause excess air in the gut. Things like chewing gum, or having smoking or really sugary foods, those can also cause excess air in the gut. So those would be another factor of potentially you might want to look into. Are you eating too quickly? How long, does it take you to finish your meal? Or are you chewing too quickly as well? Okay, so that might be an issue. Maybe next time you eat, you can, pay attention to that. Are you eating too fast? Okay, then let's go on to maybe it's a microbiome issue. So what is the microbiome? Microbiome is basically a fancy word for our good gut bacteria. So in our gut and our intestine, we have good bacteria, and that helps, protect us against pathogens. It helps with our immune system. It's good for helping to break down certain foods and just keeps everything nice and healthy. But maybe you have too little of that good gut bacteria. Maybe you took a course of antibiotics and it helped get rid of your good gut bacteria, so you're less in it. Or just maybe you don't eat a diverse diet, so maybe you're lacking in certain vegetables or fruits or proteins or grains, and you just don't have a diverse diet, which would be a decrease in a healthy microbiome. So that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about, what you can do to improve that. Okay, and another one, which is a big one, is overgrowth. So overgrowth of either bacteria, fungi, or viruses in the gut, and that would cause bloating. So for example, something like SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Some of these symptoms that would be like bloating right after eating, maybe you're having diarrhea or constipation. Also things like weight loss because you don't have an appetite because you're just constantly feeling sick. And then changes in like hair, skin, and nails because you're not able to absorb your nutrients. Another one would be candida. So that is a fungi, and that can overgrow in the gut. Symptoms of that would be things like a yellow or white tongue coat, like coating on your tongue, feeling really, really bloated, feeling fatigue, lethargic, and also maybe having yeast infections. And then another infection is H. pylori. So that would be things like having like a sharp or stabbing pain, feeling really not well, or that burning sensation, and worse like when you're away from food. So those are some overgrowth symptoms that can cause bloating. And the last one would be gallbladder issues. So does anybody know what the gallbladder is important for? Let me know in the comments if you know why the gallbladder is important. So if you're not sure what the gallbladder is, it's a little organ, and it's like a gland, and it's under your liver, which is on the right side of your body. So the liver and the gallbladder have a big role in the digestive system. So if anybody knows what the gallbladder is important for, let me know in the comments. So just some other comments, like modifying my diet and the quantity of food really helped me too. Yes, so bigger meals, when you tend to eat bigger meals, those tend to cause, excess bloating or excess gas. Mindful eating is so hard for me. I tend to eat on the go. Yeah, so definitely, like, that's just that fast-paced life that we live, like where we eat on the go because it's just, easy for us, or we are eating as we're doing other things, as we're multitasking. So it's definitely something hard to do, but I will give some tips at the end for today. Okay, so to answer the question, it is to produce bile. Yes. Storing bile, actually. Yes, somebody mentioned storing bile. And to help you digest your food. Yes, so the liver is what actually produces your bile, and then it gets sent to your gallbladder, and it is stored there until it's needed for a meal. So what bile is it basically breaks down food, and specifically fats. So if you have a sluggish gallbladder where it's not really optimal at producing or releasing the bile, or maybe you don't have a gallbladder, then you're not able to have that bile released on demand for when you need to digest your meal. So that can show up in symptoms like having difficulty digesting fatty foods, or maybe even having fatty stools, and then again, like either the more likely constipation, maybe diarrhea as well. So just to recap, let's talk about the causes, the root causes of bloating that we talked about. So the first one that I mentioned was the food sensitivities and intolerances. Then we talked about the low stomach acid. We talked about stress. We talked about excess air in the gut. We talked about having an issue with your microbiome, overgrowth, so conditions like SIBO, Candida, H. pylori, and then a gallbladder issue. So before I jump into some tips, I'm just going to pause here and let me know if you have any questions about any of those causes, or if you know of another cause that maybe you've experienced yourself, and you want to let me know about that. Yeah, go ahead and put all your questions in the chat. And while we're having a chance for everybody to write their questions, if you haven't done so already, make sure to please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It really helps with getting the channel noticed and getting everything across YouTube, so that we can have more people join us and build this community and just have more people come here. The more people that ask questions, then you get to learn even more. Okay. So we have a question about what can I take to help digestion. So I'm going to jump into those in a bit, about some tips that we can, do. But always with digestion, I always like starting with diet and lifestyle first, and then adding in things like supplements or, herbs and things to help you digest even more. But always having those diet and lifestyle things are the foundation of any treatment plan. So whether that be, making sure that you're chewing your food properly, or, having a diverse diet, those would be the foundation, but we'll jump into some things. Okay, so we have, thank you, you're welcome. I also found that cutting down dairy helped a lot too. Yeah, so a lot of people do have a dairy sensitivity, or maybe even a lactose intolerance. So sometimes that can definitely help taking it out. And then seeing how you do without it. Maybe you're able to add it back in, or maybe you need to take it out completely for a while. Okay, is it better to exercise before or after eating your biggest meal of the day? I think that depends on the person. So if you were to eat a big meal and then go and exercise right away, you probably wouldn't feel too good. Your blood needs to run to your muscles, and then if it's trying to do that, it's not going to your gut, and then if you don't have blood going to your gut, you're not able to digest your food. So I would say either space it, have your big meal and then space it out a couple of hours, then go and exercise. Or if you're able to have something smaller, exercise and then have your meal after. And then always having a protein-rich meal after exercise helps to replete any lost amino acids, helps with muscle building. And then before a meal, you'd actually probably want to have a more carbohydrate-heavy meal, because that will give you the energy that you need. Okay, I'm going to jump into the tips. Okay, so as I mentioned, always start with diet and lifestyle tips. That's the best thing to do to have a foundation for any sort of treatment plan. And then you can add in supplements, herbs, or anything else that's needed. So let's go back to the root cause, the first one that we talked about, root cause number 1, which was food intolerances and food sensitivities. So how can we treat this? So if you've noticed that this is your issue, so all of you that asked about help for bloating or how can I reduce my bloating, if this is your issue, if this is what you think is an issue for you, then this is what you'll need to do. You'll need to find out which foods are causing, you'd have triggers, you'd have bloating. So there's a couple ways of doing this. One way, you can do a diet diary. So what you'll do is like you'll print off or even just like list off like the days of the week, and then you're gonna write down what it's gonna take a while, but you're gonna have to write down what you ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then do that, you know, every day. And at the bottom, just make notes. Okay, I was bloated. I had constipation, or I broke out in acne. And then you'll basically do that for a couple of weeks and assess that. So then you'll see, okay, this day, this is what I ate, and these are the symptoms that I had. And it's also good for, remember I talked about like the delayed reaction. So it's also important for that, because you might then find a pattern, like maybe you were bloated one day and then you noticed that like a few days ago you ate something and then that same pattern happened again. So that would be one thing for figuring things out, doing a diet diary. Another thing would be doing an elimination diet. So it is a little bit restrictive at the beginning because you have to eliminate a lot of foods. But then the goal is to never completely not be able to enjoy foods. Like I always talk about this with my patients. Like I want people to be able to enjoy their life and be able to enjoy foods. You shouldn't have to be restricting yourself forever. So it's a good way of figuring out, you know, temporarily what can we remove, how can we then heal our gut and then add those foods back in. So elimination diet would essentially be eliminating the big common triggers. So that's things like dairy, wheat, corn, even things like coffee, eggs, certain vegetables and fruits. And then you eliminate them, you know, for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then you slowly add them back in. So you add them back in one at a time. So you'd add back in dairy, and if you notice that you're okay for that for 3 days, you don't have any symptoms, then, you know, you're good. Then if you did have a symptom, you'd have to then eliminate it, wait a few days before you try something else. So it's a trial and error. It does take some time, but it can have really good results. And it gives you that like instant reaction of like, was I irritated by this food or not? So those are kind of two ways you can figure out if you have any intolerances or sensitivities, either the diet diary or the elimination diet. And then, like I said, eventually you want to be able to heal your gut properly so you can have all those foods that you enjoy. Okay, so somebody mentioned like I did that. It was the dairy for me. So I'm assuming that they're referring to the diet diary. You know, somebody said a good idea. So yes, like does take some time, but it is a good idea to, you know, it's a simple way of figuring out what's going on. And it's great, like I mentioned, for other symptoms like maybe fatigue or acne or other things like that. Yeah, somebody mentioned like my body hated corn products. Yeah, so corn tends to be heavily genetically modified because it's in so many things, like they just mass produce it. So sometimes that can be a trigger for certain things. Okay, next let's jump into low stomach acid. So like I mentioned before, we need stomach acid to digest our foods and just overall improve digestion. So I'm not sure if any of you know, but do you know any foods that can help with stomach acid, or foods? I'll give you a hint. In botanical medicine, we call them bitters. So does anybody know any bitter foods that are good for stimulating digestion? So essentially what it does is like when you chew on this bitter food, it helps to produce those salivary enzymes that I mentioned. And then it also helps improve your stomach acid and like get those juices flowing so that when you eat, you can then digest properly. So it's something that you'd want to have just prior to a meal, like you can have it just before your meal, and it helps with increasing digestion. So we have some things like lemon, ginger, pineapple. Those lemon's a little bitter, that could potentially be one. Pineapple actually has good enzymes in it, specifically actually good for inflammation, but not what I'm thinking. Ginger is more so soothing. It helps with nausea, helps with like an irritated, upset stomach. Somebody said they're not sure. So I'll give you some hints. So I'll tell you what they are. So things like arugula. So I don't know if you've ever had arugula, but it's pretty bitter. Things like kale, those really like bitter, like radicchio and endive, those lettuces that are like, purple and white. What else? Grapefruit is a good one, and also apple cider vinegar. And I think I already said kale. So yeah, that would be like those ones are main ones. So basically, those are great bitter foods for having just before a meal. They help improve digestion and get the digestive juices flowing. Somebody mentioned Nona loves those. Yes, those. Yeah. See, they know back in the day how to eat properly. They probably ate it just before their meal too, which is great. So that would be bitter foods. Then there's also herbs, specific botanical herbs that can be useful to help with low stomach acid. So, you have to, I'll tell you some things and you can just look them up, but things like gentian, dandelion, burdock, artichoke, those are really good bitter herbs that can help improve digestion. So that's kind of how you would heal if you had low stomach acid. You would improve your digestion and increase your stomach acid through things like bitter herbs and bitter foods. If you really needed more support, you could look into a digestive enzyme. And that would have the actual enzymes that we have in our body. It would have like forms of those enzymes, and you would take that just before your meal and it would help break things down. So if you have, more chronic bloating, maybe that would be something that you need. If you just notice that you have a little bit of bloating when you eat your meals, then trying out the herbs or the foods would be helpful. Yes, so we have some people saying thank you, and I forgot about arugula. Yeah, it is a great one. Okay, let's talk about, I'm going to actually talk about gallbladder issues because it's very similar to what we just talked about. So like I mentioned, gallbladder, you need bile to digest your fats. So having something like a digestive enzyme, if you don't have a gallbladder, or if you have a sluggish gallbladder, or if you're noticing that you're not digesting fats properly, that would be helpful because it does contain bile. Or there's ones that do and ones that don't. So having one that does have bile would be helpful. Also giving your liver some support because, as I mentioned, your liver is going to now be taking over. So things like the bitter foods are great for your liver. The bitter foods, the bitter herbs, having things like beets and garlic and onions are also great for the liver. So that's gallbladder, low stomach acid are pretty similar. So that's why I just put those two in there. Does anybody have any questions about what we just talked about? We're going to talk about some more tips, but I'll just recap for you. So we talked about food intolerances and sensitivities. So how you can figure out if you have that and then what you can do. So like either the diet diary or the elimination diet. And then the low stomach acid and gallbladder issues. So having things like bitter foods, bitter herbs, maybe a digestive enzyme. Okay, so we have a question about, do you get all the benefits from juicing those, i.e. the beets? So yes and no. You'll still get like the really good vitamins from the beets. I don't think you'd really want to juice garlic, but like beets and like arugula, those are the things that we're talking about. Yeah, so you'll get the vitamins from them, but then you're missing out of the fiber, and that fiber is important for like helping, create formed bowel movements and helping your stool move across the intestinal tract. So without that, fiber, then you're lacking that. So there's pros and cons to juicing. You'll still, it's a great way of getting a ton of vitamins in at once, but then you miss out on that fiber, which isn't the greatest for blood sugar spikes. And like I mentioned, if you're looking for something more so for gut healing, for the liver's, also helps with proper bowel movements and all of that, then you probably would want to eat them whole. Okay, somebody said I have juiced garlic before and it was not a good idea. Yeah, I wouldn't think so. So I wouldn't suggest to do that. Okay, let's move on to the microbiome. So I mentioned about what the microbiome is and how it's like your good gut bacteria. So there's a supplement that we can take to help replenish that good gut bacteria. Do any of you know what it's called? It's a pretty popular supplement. There's different strains of it. You can get them at the health food store. They should be stored in the fridge most of the time if you're getting a good one. I'm just trying to give you a hint here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this supplement and why it might not always be a good idea to have it. So let's see if anybody knows what I'm talking about. Okay. Let's see. So somebody said digestive enzymes. No, it's not digestive enzymes. Probiotics it is. And kombucha is technically, technically a probiotic. So yes, it is probiotics. Great job. Yes, that's what I was going to say. I'm sure you were going to say that. Just joking. So, okay. So yes, it's probiotics. So probiotics are the pill form of our good gut bacteria. So it's a way of replenishing your good gut bacteria. So like I mentioned, if you had antibiotics that kind of wipe them out, or if you just maybe lacking it because you're not getting a diverse diet in like fruits, vegetables, carbohydrates, protein, you might be lacking in that good gut bacteria. So let's talk a little bit about probiotics. So, there's times where it's needed and there's times where it's not needed, and there's times where it actually might do more harm than good. So in conditions like, SIBO, like bacterial overgrowth, if you took a probiotic, it would actually cause you to feel sick. You wouldn't feel so good because it is just increasing the bacteria in the gut, even though it's good bacteria, but you already have an overgrowth. So that wouldn't be a good thing to do. So if you were someone that took probiotics and you didn't feel so good with them, then that might be something that you want to investigate. But overall, probiotics help to form proper bowel movements. They help to reduce bloating because they're just populating the good gut bacteria. Like I mentioned, they're great for the immune system, and it's just overall probably going to help you more than it would cause you any adverse effects. Like that would be more so if you had SIBO or even candida or an overgrowth of bacteria. So there's ways of getting probiotics in through the diet. So somebody had mentioned kombucha. So that is one way of getting probiotics in through the diet. Kombucha is just a fermented tea drink. Another thing would be having things like fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt. So we like coconut yogurt or Greek yogurt. Those are great ways of getting in probiotics. Somebody said yogurt. So exactly, yogurt. Kefir, which is like a yogurt drink. So you always want to try to add, like I mentioned, you always want to start with diet first. So adding things in through the diet. So you want to add in those probiotic foods. And then we actually want to add in prebiotic foods. So prebiotics are what feed probiotics. Like they're the food that probiotics then like live off of and they feed off of. And that just helps create a balance with both. So things like that would be apples, chicory root, leeks, garlic, onions, what else? Asparagus. Those are good prebiotic foods. Oh, also tempeh. I'm not sure if any of you have ever had tempeh, but it's like a soy-based product and it's fermented. So anything that's fermented is going to be like have the probiotics in it. Okay, so what have we talked about? Okay, let's jump into the overgrowth. So those are what I mentioned about like SIBO, Candida, H. pylori. So these are challenging, you know, and I'd probably suggest if you have one of these to work with a healthcare provider, because you need to like get rid of the bad bacteria. So whether that be through antibiotics or antimicrobial herbs, you need to get rid of the excess bacteria. So like in SIBO, it's an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. In Candida, it's an overgrowth of a fungus, a yeast, Candida. In H. pylori, it's actually an overgrowth in the stomach of H. pylori. So you need to get rid of that first, and then heal with adding in, you know, you would add in probiotics after, because if you're getting rid of the bad bacteria, you want to replenish with the good. You'd want to like soothe the GI tract with something like L-glutamine or aloe, and just overall, it would take a while. So those ones are more challenging. If those are conditions that you think you have based on the symptoms I mentioned before, if you think that's what's causing your bloating, then those ones you probably want to go seek some extra help for that. Okay, and another thing that you might want to do to help reduce your bloating is just some general like lifestyle tips that I mentioned before. So these are 3 things that you can do at your next meal to help prevent bloating. So first, I want you to pause and take a deep breath, and maybe do that for about 10 seconds. The next thing you're going to do is, as I mentioned, chew your food really slowly, and make sure you're having about like 20 bites per mouthful. So slowly chew your food, slowly swallow your food. And the last thing would be eliminate any distractions. So whether you're near like watching TV, you're reading, you know, you're on your phone, that would be. So those 3 things, if you can do those, that probably will help reduce just those general things of bloating that I mentioned that may be just due to, you know, just the way you're eating or your eating habits or your lifestyle habits. So that would be something you can do. Another thing would be is avoiding maybe really raw foods. Sometimes too many raw foods are hard on the digestive tract and difficult to digest because of a lot of fiber. So a lot of like raw carrots or raw veggies, broccoli, lettuce, any of those things, like you can, you know, maybe have like only a quarter of your meal with the raw foods and like the rest have it as cooked. That's a huge thing. Another thing would be the way you kind of balance your meals, or the way what foods you eat first. So something like if you're eating something like fruit or something that can digest pretty quickly because it's like quick carbohydrates, like fruits, you don't want to eat that at the end, because it kind of just gets left on at the end of like the digestive tract, and it can ferment and increase bloating. So you kind of want to eat that first, or eat those kind of foods first. Okay, and then, another tip would be to space out your meals. So spacing them out about 3 to 4 hours rather than just like grazing all day. So that's because we have this thing called the migrating motor complex in our gut, and what it does is it like takes time to like move everything through and along. So if you're constantly just like eating throughout the day, what's going to happen is it's never going to really have its chance to move things along. It's going to like always be going and never have that chance to fully space things out. And then you might experience bloating. So just spacing meals out 3 to 4 hours might be beneficial. All right. If anybody has any questions, please ask them now. But I'm going to jump into some teas because everybody loves tea. So let's talk about some teas. So teas are great for helping with digestion. So how about you put it in the comments, what are your favorite teas for digestion? Which ones do you like? Which ones have worked for you? Which ones don't you like so much? Let's see what you can come up with. Oh. Sorry, my camera went off. Hi, sorry, the camera went off. Okay. Okay, let's see what people have to say. So, yes, I'm back. Yay, sorry about that. Okay, so camera error there. Okay, so somebody mentioned fennel. We got lots of fennel. Yes, so fennel is probably one of the best ones for digestion and bloating. It really helps with reducing any excess like gas and bloating in the GI tract. We have green tea. Yeah, green tea is a great one too. It has many different properties. It's also really good for helping like calming. So if you're somebody that gets bloated due to stress, green tea is a great one. So things like chamomile, fennel, those ones are things that in ginger, we call them carminative herbs in botanical medicine. So that basically just means that they help relieve any like indigestion, gas, and bloating, and they help with releasing digestive enzymes, and they also help to soothe an irritated tract. So those would be good ones. Okay, what else? So we got fennel, chamomile, green tea. Another one is ginger. I think I mentioned that. So ginger is also good for nausea. So if you have like upset stomach, nausea, even headaches, that would be a good one to take. And then there's marshmallow root. So marshmallow root is a great tea for helping with that like irritated burning feeling, or if you have any ulcers, or if you have acid reflux. Marshmallow root is called a demulcent, so it helps to soothe and heal like an irritated GI tract. And then there's dandelion. So dandelion root, I kind of mentioned it before, it's a bitter herb, so it's also great in a tea for helping with constipation, with gallbladder issues, with bloating, and any indigestion. So whenever having a tea, you want to make sure that you steep it and you let the essential oils infuse. So it usually says on like the box how long you should steep it for. It can vary from like 5 minutes to 10 minutes, but you just want to let the tea bag steep inside and then cover it and make sure that you do that before you consume it because it really helps to absorb it. Okay, let's see if there are any questions. Please put them in the chat. I'm just going to do a recap and then I'll answer all your questions. And somebody said, guess who's back? Back again. Yes, I am back. Okay, so let's recap. So we talked all about, the root causes of bloating. We talked about food intolerances and sensitivities and how you can do a diet diary or an elimination diet to figure out what that is and then eliminate those from your diet. We talked about low stomach acid and how you need that to digest. And if you don't have enough stomach acid, you can have symptoms like bloating. So to combat that, you're going to add in like bitter foods or bitter enzymes, or bitter herbs, or if you really need a digestive enzyme. We talked about an overgrowth of bacteria. So, if you had something like SIBO, or H. pylori or Candida, and that one you would really need to eradicate those before you heal your gut. We talked about microbiome, so having a diverse, diet and having probiotics or prebiotic and probiotic foods. Then we also mentioned gallbladder issues. So if you don't have a gallbladder, or if you have a sluggish gallbladder, adding in some enzymes and some things to support your liver. And then just like the general things like spacing your meals out and eating mindfully. Don't chew your food too quickly. So, don't chew your food too quickly. Yes. Don't just like swallow, without really paying attention to what you're doing. And yeah, so anybody have any questions for me? I will take some time over the next 10 minutes to answer them, and then we will wrap it up. If you don't have any questions, even just maybe let me know in the comments, like which one of these things do you think sounds like you? Is it the low stomach acid? Is it the intolerances? Which one of these things do you think is you that you can, work on, that you think you'll need to work on? Or which one of these teas is your favorite tea? Or, any of these things, like what did you learn new from this episode today? Okay, so what exercise is good for bloating is a question. Yeah, that's a great question. So if, like I mentioned, if you think your bloating is due to stress, then actually more grounding exercises like yoga, deep breathing, meditation would be really beneficial. But if you just wanted, like, just to pick one, would probably be walking, because walking, you're not doing anything too high intensity, so you're not increasing cortisol. You're outside in like nature, so you're able to breathe in fresh air, you're able to relax and have that overall sense of calm. So that would probably be a great exercise that you could add in. If you're not able to go for walks, then even just like stationary stationary things at home, like just sitting in your chair and doing like any sort of ab crunches in your chair or stretching in your chair if you're not able to get up and walk around. So that would be probably the best thing that you could do. Okay, next question. Is there anything you should take before a meal to reduce the chance of bloating? Yeah, so kind of like those digestive bitters that I was talking about, those would be great to take before a meal. So having things like arugula or kale or radicchio, endive, having a little bit of those just before eating would help reduce bloating, because they increase the digestive enzymes and get the gastric juices flowing. Okay, another question, is salt bad? So no, like salt, nothing is ever essentially really bad. It's just also like what's the quality of it, how much of it are you having? So if you're having excess salt, like I mentioned at the beginning, water retention can cause bloating. So maybe it's actually just you have excess water. So if you're having too much salt brings the excess water in due to like the osmosis, and then that would cause you to have bloating. So you always want to make sure you're not having too much salt. Like be careful how much you put on your food. Are you having a lot of packaged foods, which would then be filled with salt? Okay, thank you for reminding me about tea. Oh, you're welcome. I'm just found expired bags in my cupboard. We'll go get some more. Yeah, so tea does expire. I don't think it expires that quickly, but it does. So you want to just make sure you're having good quality tea. How long should you wait before lying down after eating? That's a great question. So it can vary person to person. Some people are able just to eat and then lie down, which is not the greatest. But if you were to lie down after eating, you probably would experience symptoms like acid reflux, or maybe, difficulty sleeping, that like heartburn sensation. So I would say at least wait an hour, maybe 2 hours if you have, sorry, my camera went off again. So maybe 2 hours you have to wait before lying down. Don't know why it's doing this. Yeah, okay, I don't know if I cut out there, but basically you want to wait 1 hour to 2 hours before lying down after eating. Okay, any other questions? Yes, I don't know why it's doing that today. Okay. So we talked about quite a bit. Maybe for next week, you can try, like over the next week, you can try doing those 3 things that I mentioned that you can do just before or during your meal. So the first thing would be like stopping, taking a deep breath, and preparing yourself for your meal, chewing your food slowly, and then avoiding distractions. So that's something that you can do over the next week. Let me know how, that works for you next week. Also, just like, monitor your symptoms and what you think could maybe be causing your bloating. And then for next week, we're going to be talking about exercise, physical activity. So the different types of exercise, like aerobics, strength, meditation, what the benefits of those are, how it goes just beyond physical, and some ways of having a good exercise routine. And I'm going to give you some tips for, incorporating a good exercise routine and sticking to it. So if there's no further questions for today, I think we'll wrap up here. Like I mentioned, next week we're talking about exercise. So before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps with getting my channel noticed across YouTube. And I will see you all next week, and we will talk some health. Bye.